Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qi Zhi. Coming up in this edition, international rescue teams are searching for survivors under the rubble after the 7.9 magnitude earthquake in Myanmar. Israel indicates it could launch another major offensive in Rafah in southern Gaza, as Palestinians reported over 1,000 deaths since the breakdown of the ceasefire. And a Paris court has found French far-right leader Marine Le Pen guilty of embezzlement. We begin in Asia. International rescue teams are searching for survivors under the rubble after the 7.9 magnitude earthquake in Myanmar. Chinese rescuers have brought 8 people to safety as of Tuesday afternoon. They are not giving up beyond the 72-hour golden period. The strong tremor last week has killed at least 2,700 people. Myanmar, along with the international community, are providing food and drinking water to the disaster-hit areas. Mo Xiaoxing has more on how locals in Mandalay are coping with the shortage of supplies.
According to what I have seen in Mandalay, the local communication situation is still very poor. Even in the center part of Mandalay, most areas have no signal. Some places can receive phone signals, but only weak data networks. And Wi-Fi is also out in restaurants and locals' home. Such communication conditions have also brought difficulties to the rescue operations, because some rescue teams separated to rescue different places, and they need to maintain effective communication with each other. Most of the Chinese rescue teams and Myanmar civilian rescue teams concentrated in the Yunnan Hall in Mandalay, which is temporarily used as the command center of all rescue forces, contact center and victim settlement center. Most of the volunteers here are also local overseas Chinese. Mandalay is currently facing shortage of water and electricity. The local power department is stepping up the repair of power facilities damaged by the earthquake. Actually, Myanmar has been facing electricity shortage problem, and there was no public electricity for almost half of the day. Some residents actually installed photovoltaic power generation equipment in their homes, so after the earthquake, they can provide help to neighbors who need electricity. There are also many wells in the city. Because water isn't coming at home, residents are waiting in line to get water. However, earthquakes will pollute groundwater, so it may bring challenges to the subsequent epidemic prevention work in the local area. Most of the urban victims were afraid that aftershocks will cause their homes to collapse, so they set up mosquito nets in front of their home to sleep. Many locals also spontaneously donated food and daily necessities to the homeless victims. The above is the situation I observed in Mandalay.
That is Mo Xiaoxing reporting from Mandalay. After the earthquake in Myanmar, the local Chinese community and overseas Chinese quickly mobilized into a crucial rescue force. Before official aid arrived, they were already on the front lines, offering assistance and fighting to save lives. Zhang Tao reports.
Cao Ya-ting, a 27-year-old Chinese in Yan'an, took action on the night of March the 28th. She posted an urgent call for volunteers to head to Mandalay, the hardest hit area.
We organized everything ourselves, without a formal structure. A WeChat group filled up instantly. People donated money and supplies, forming teams that rushed to Mandalay at incredible speed.
By the early hours of the 29th, Cao's 15-person team reached the disaster zone and immediately teamed up with local firefighters to begin rescue efforts. Their goal was to save as many lives as possible within the critical 72-hour golden window.
When we arrived at 1 a.m., neither the rescue teams nor we rested. We used lie detectors to check each site, staying awake all night.
Despite severe road damage in Yan'an, which turned a 5-hour drive into a 14-hour journey, volunteers drove their own cars, bringing supplies and determination to help. Cao also noted the growing public support.
People from across Myanmar and China have been messaging me, asking how to send supplies and donate money. Nearly 100 people have donated so far. The heat was unbearable, over 40 degrees Celsius. The ground was so hot, it felt like walking on fire. I can't imagine the suffering of those trapped under the rubble. It's heartbreaking. But the selflessness of the Chinese community and other Myanmar citizens is heartening.
Tang Jianzu, an overseas Chinese and rescue team member, hoped to save more lives before international teams arrived.
It's been 4 days with little rest. I've seen families in distress, pleading for help. I've been updating the situation in real time, assuring them we will do everything we can. Myanmar's fire teams are still working hard, and we continue our efforts.
Tom and the firefighters barely slept. When exhaustion hit, they would rest briefly before continuing their work. By the early hours of the 30th, just as Tom was preparing to return rest, he encountered the Blue Sky Rescue Team, which had arrived from China. He decided not to leave and stay behind to assist with coordinating efforts between the local and Chinese volunteer groups, helping them familiarize themselves with the area and taking on translation duties.
That was Jian Tao reporting. Turning to the Middle East, Palestinian officials say over 1,000 people have been killed since Israel renewed its air and ground offensive across Gaza on March 18th. The Israeli military indicated it could launch another major offensive in Rafah soon, ordering evacuations on the southernmost area of the Gaza Strip. In a shocking discovery, the bodies of 15 emergency and aid workers from the Red Crescent, the UN and the Palestinian Civil Defense have been recovered from a grave in the sand in southern Gaza. Rami Amagari reports.
Since the beginning of the Eid al-Fitr occasion in Gaza, 85 Palestinians have been reportedly killed. Dozens of them are women and children, and hundreds others have been wounded during Israeli airstrikes, multiple Israeli airstrikes that are continuing in all over parts of the Gaza Strip, particularly in south of the region. Also in south of the region, the Israeli army had issued a new order of evacuation for the population of the Rafah city, the whole Rafah city, and south of the territory. This escalation comes against the backdrop of the World Food Programme announcement that all the bakeries in the Gaza Strip that are supported by the World Food Programme will be shut down because of the lack of flour and wheat for the bakeries to run in the territory amidst the closure of the border crossings by Israel since the ceasefire has collapsed in Gaza. Also in the Rafah city, it's noteworthy that dead bodies of 15 Palestinian paramedics and civil defense crew members have been recovered after they have been killed over the past week during an Israeli invasion into part of the Rafah city. The Israeli army says that those recovered are affiliated with Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, something that the Palestinian parties or authorities refute and say this is a crime that should be held punishable by the international law.
That's Rami Amagara reporting from Gaza. Moving on to North America, US President Donald Trump is expected to announce reciprocal tariffs on Wednesday. He has dubbed April 2nd as Liberation Day, with promises to impose import duties to match the levies from all other countries. Trump said the tariffs aim to reverse US trade deficits. There are doubts if it will have the desired effect. Goldman Sachs has raised the likelihood of a US recession. Nathan King reports from outside the White House.
Beautiful sunny day here in Washington, D.C., but there's a feeling of trepidation in the air. Wednesday, says Donald Trump in the White House behind me, is Liberation Day. Well, it means essentially World Tariff Day. Having imposed and taken away and reimposed tariffs, now we're asking Americans what they think about the new president's policies.
I think it's a negotiation strategy, so it's going to be outrageous and something to catch everyone's attention, and then eventually there'll be some negotiation.
Are you a bit worried about prices going up in the medium term, though?
Well, they're already up, so. But yeah, they'll probably go up. Yeah, so it's going to be difficult.
Against it, but he has a plan. I don't know what his plan is, but I have to wait and see it play out.
Little bit worried about that. Like, our income, everything is so high, everything is in case. What can do? House prices, living cost, everything. Like every grocery store, everything is so high. So we see what he can do. He just started. Maybe he make a good decision.
And it's not just ordinary Americans who are concerned. The financial markets are too. Investment bank Goldman Sachs now puts the risk of US recession at 35%, upping its forecast from 20%, warning about the tariffs' tax-like impact on consumer spending and financial markets. We note that President Trump recently said he expected his planned tariffs to raise the unusually specific figure of $600 billion to $1 trillion over the next year, implying an average tariff rate of 18 to 30% on current import volumes. Of course, President Trump could change his mind on tariffs at any second. We've seen it already in this administration. But from Main Street to Wall Street, the feeling is one of worry because there's no certainty. And certainly, people don't want to pay higher prices.
That was Nathan King on the impacts of looming US tariffs. In Europe, a Paris court has found French far-right leader Marine Le Pen guilty of embezzlement. The ruling bars her from running for the presidency for 5 years. The leader of the National Rally Party said the verdict is political and vowed to appeal. Ross Cullum sent this report from Paris.
Well, it's a historic day for French politics. Marine Le Pen leads the biggest party in the French parliament, and she leads the polls at the moment, 2 years out from the next presidential election in April 2027. It's an election that, as it stands and pending an appeal, she will not be allowed to contest. On Monday, she held a crisis meeting with staff following the verdict and the sentencing in the Paris High Court, and then she came out defiant in a primetime TV interview.
Rendez-vous compte. Do you realize what a dark day this is? Monday, March 31st, 2025. What a dark day this is for our democracy and our country, where millions of French people will be deprived by a judge with no recourse possible of the candidate who is considered the favorite for the presidential election. That should scandalize anyone who cares about democracy and the rule of law in reality.
Well, on Monday, Marine Le Pen and 8 of her colleagues were found guilty of having used money intended for European Union parliamentary aids to instead pay staff who worked for her National Rally Party. The lead judge overseeing the case said, quote, "The investigations showed that these were not administrative errors, but embezzlement within the framework of a system put in place to reduce the party's costs." Le Pen was also fined $108,000 and given a 4-year prison sentence, 2 years of which will be suspended and the other 2 will be served wearing an electronic bracelet rather than being spent behind bars. She leads the largest party in the National Assembly, and she ran unsuccessfully for president 3 times in 2012, 2017 and 2022.
It is the voters who decide in a democracy, and I am here to tell them this evening, don't worry, I am not disheartened. I am like you, scandalized, indignant, but that indignation, that sense of injustice, is maybe another driver in the fight I am waging for them.
Now that she is unlikely to be able to stand in the 2027 presidential election, the race to succeed Emmanuel Macron is now wide open. Macron cannot run again after serving 2 consecutive terms in office. Le Pen's party president, the 29-year-old Jordan Bardella, may replace her as the National Rally candidate if her appeal against her sentencing and verdict ultimately prove unsuccessful.
That was Ross Cullen on the implications of Marine Le Pen's embezzlement case. Finally, in Africa, Somalian President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud has extended an invitation to political and civil society leaders for a national dialogue aimed at uniting efforts against violent extremists and strengthening democratic governance. The initiative has received a positive response from key opposition parties, signaling a potential step toward political reconciliation. Mohammed Kaiye has more from Mogadishu.
The president's announcement made during his Eid al-Fitr address, comes at a critical moment as tensions between the federal government and regional leaders in Puntland and Jubaland states persist.
We
welcome positive initiatives to safeguard our nationhood. In that regard, I extend my invitation to political leaders and civil society to incorporate ideas and hard work in the ongoing fight against armed group Al-Shabaab and our efforts in state-building process based on values of democracy and federal system of government through our constitution.
Major opposition political parties have welcomed the president's initiative. They called for the submission of the main agenda items as well as the timing of the talks. The leader of Jubaland State called for unity.
We need to focus all our efforts and energy on the fight against Al-Shabaab militants. We need to unite on this cause, and I welcome initiatives for talks and dialogue to move our country forward. We should not count on our international partners.
As the nation awaits the start of the national dialogue, Somali armed forces continue their efforts to push back Al-Shabaab militants in order to ensure security and peace.
That was Mohammed Kaya reporting from Mogadishu. Now recapping the headlines before we go. International rescue teams are searching for survivors under the rubble after the 7.9 magnitude earthquake in Myanmar. The number of deaths has surpassed 2,700. Israel has indicated it could launch another major offensive in Rafah in southern Gaza, as Palestinians have reported over 1,000 deaths since the collapse of the ceasefire. And a Paris court has found French far-right leader Marine Le Pen guilty of embezzlement. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.